You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers! Andrew Welsh Huggins is an acclaimed author known for his gripping thrillers and intricate storytelling. He balances his writing career with his life in Ohio, where he enjoys the vibrant local culture and spending time with his family. His latest books, The Mailman and Deadbeat, showcase his talent for creating complex characters and suspenseful plots that keep readers on the edge of their seats. While he's not writing, Andrew can be found exploring new ideas and engaging with his readers. Please put your hands together for the amazingly talented and fellow Buckeye, Andrew Welsh Huggins. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me on this episode of On the Air with Florenza, where I have the opportunity to talk to you not about one of your amazing titles, but two. So before we get started, as is my tradition, we are going to toast to an amazing show. And for the last couple shows, I have been drinking sparkling water. Today, it has already been a day. So I have a little margarita.
Good for you.
And you are drinking?
I'm drinking tea. It's a cold day here in Columbus with snow falling, so it seems perfect.
Perfect. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, yes, you guys heard my ice clinking. I am so thrilled to talk to you because we're going to be discussing the sunset of one series and the sunrise of another, and just talk about that transition for you. Before we get into all of that, please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and just something quirky that may not have made it to any other interview, something unusual about you that we would be interested to know.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Just what a pleasure to be here and to talk books with you. I would say, just to introduce myself, I'm Andrew Welsh Huggins. I'm a mystery writer in Columbus, Ohio. I have been writing and publishing mystery novels for several years. I did overlap for a while as I was a journalist for 34 years, the last 24 years with the Associated Press in Columbus. I left that position a couple of years ago, and now I'm devoting myself to writing full-time. I write mystery novels. I also write and publish mystery and sci-fi stories in a bunch of different magazines. Let's see. Something that has not made it into any interviews is that in the 1980s, I lived in Ireland in a Gaelic-speaking village. And for a very brief period of time, I was fluent in Irish Gaelic.
Wow, that is a nice little nugget. Do you miss that scenery being there? And what was the most inspiring or thrilling thing that happened while you were in Ireland?
Yeah, great question. I do miss it. I was there for several months. One of the things that the Irish guidebooks don't tell you about is winter in Ireland. So starting in December, January, and February, it rains constantly. It's very cold.
Oh, wow.
So I don't miss that. I do miss, I was on the far western edge of County Kerry. So literally it was the westernmost point, and the scenery was just jaw-dropping. I mean, you'd look out at the Atlantic and see these craggy islands, and wow, it was so beautiful. But what I truly miss is that was an era when there were a number of Irish-speaking people in that area, many of them quite elderly. And in fact, I don't think this is true now, but back then in the mid-'80s, some of these folks probably were more comfortable speaking Irish than English. So it was really the end of an era there. So yeah, special place, special time.
Nice. Now, does your lineage trace back to Ireland, or was that just something that was on your bucket list to do?
Yeah, more the bucket list thing.
Uh-huh.
I think we do have some Irish in our background, but I've never been a person that like particularly identifies as Irish.
Okay.
But it was just a place I always wanted to go.
Nice. What a beautiful thing. And to stay for so long. Most people pack a suitcase and stay for like 3 days, and you're there for like enough time to learn the language. So that's cool. When you were creating, I'm making that transition from writing more of the Private Eye series unto the thriller series. Talk to us about what brought about that transition, and was it a smooth transition, or did you find yourself questioning, oh my gosh, what am I doing and why?
Well, I say that to myself every day, but um, yeah. So, great question. I'm a longtime big fan of the private eye genre. I grew up reading, Robert B. Parker, his Spencer series. I'm a huge fan of the Walter Mosley, Easy Rollins
Oh,
series.
yes.
Just I could go on and on about that series. So I've always loved the private eye genre, still do. Really enjoyed bringing my character to life. He's a former Ohio State and Cleveland Browns quarterback turned private eye in Columbus. But I was definitely looking to, I guess, expand my horizons. And in some ways, there was a bridge book. I wrote a standalone thriller called The End of the Road, which came out in 2023. That's set in and around Columbus, and that's a one-off. I don't think there'll be any sequels to it, but I certainly uh, kind of caught the bug, I guess, when I
Uh-huh.
wrote that. Partly because it was just really nice tackling a different genre a little bit because my Private Eye series is in first person. That was my first third person book.
Uh-huh.
Um, and honestly, I wasn't really expecting what happened to happen next, but a short story, excuse me, a short story just kind of popped into my head one day, almost fully developed, as occasionally happens to me.
Uh-huh.
And it was the concept of a unassuming, somewhat slight guy who is a mailman. He's a freelance mailman, though. He doesn't work for any entity. He is a person who is hired to deliver items, information, and sometimes even people. And this idea came to me really almost fully formed of him being hired to escort a young mother and her young daughter out away from an abusive marriage and to safety. And along the way, um, the husband sends some bad actors to try to retrieve his wife and daughter. And the thing about my character, Mercury Carter, is he pretty much has one main motto, which he's never missed a delivery, and he'll do pretty much anything to keep that streak alive. So in that particular story, it did not end well for the bad actors. So that kind of got me really intensely thinking about this character. That story was published, in fact, it had the same name as my novel. It's called The Mailman. That came out in 2020, and I wrote and have published four more stories about this character. But then along the way, it just felt very natural to tackle a book. And in a somewhat similar fashion, the opening scene of The Mailman just came to me, and it kind of stuck with me for several years. I couldn't get it out of my head. And that scene is that a couple, husband, wife, lawyer couple, are in their suburban Indianapolis home when a gang of home invaders break in and prepare to torture them for information about a woman that the woman attorney's firm is in litigation with. She really has no idea what's going on. There, it is not looking good for them. And right when it looks like it's the end, the doorbell rings, and on the other side of the door is my character, Mercury Carter, who has no idea what's going on inside. He simply is there because he has a delivery for Rachel.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, he does not like it when things get in the way of his delivery. So it doesn't end well for the people inside.
What was it like for you getting these stories? And I completely understand full stories coming to you, and like full manifested, like they're from beginning to end. The characters have personalities and names, and you feel like they're actual people. When you first started writing those short stories, did you ever yourself envisioning it becoming the earmark for a brand new series?
Such a great question. I would say the short answer is yes. I knew right away that I had something special.
Uh-huh.
The first story definitely got a lot of attention. I'll just give a shout out. It was published in Mickey Finn 21st Century Noir, which is a long running series of anthologies published by Down and Out Books and edited by Michael Bracken. And I just knew right away there was something kind of special about this character. But honestly, the most important thing is I really enjoyed him and I was having fun writing him. So I'd actually have to look back at my notes and figure out when I started the first book as compared to the stories. But yeah, I knew right away this was a guy I wanted to give a book length adventure to. And it took me, let's see, the first story was published in 2020 and here we are 2025. So yeah, it took me about 5 years to pull it off.
What phase were you in to writing the Andy Hayes mystery series? Did this new concept come to you? At which point did the mailman come to you while you were in this other series?
Yeah, great question. I mean, kind of in the middle. Sick to Death, which is the eighth book in the Andy Hayes series, has a kind of interesting publication history. I started writing it in August of 2019, and it didn't come out until this past fall in October of 2024. And in the interim, you know, obviously the pandemic hit, that turned everything upside down. And as a result of the pandemic, it didn't affect just my writing life, but it affected that book, which has a theme of wrongdoing in a medical setting.
Oh,
And I realized very quickly, um, well, let me back up. There's a bit of a debate in the mystery writing world. There was at least about whether people wanted to address the pandemic at all.
uh-huh.
There are plenty of writers who just said, I don't ever want to think or talk about this again. And I get that
Yeah, yeah.
after what we went through. But for me, I just felt that references to the pandemic, if I was going to be writing about hospitals and nurses and doctors in the early 2020s, I had to reference the pandemic. So frankly, I then spent a solid year or more rewriting the entire book.
Oh,
I mean, I had a pretty solid manuscript, but I just flipped it upside down. Anyway, along in there um, came the origins of the mailman, and I was kind of juggling both, not both books. The
uh-huh.
I probably turned in Sick to Death sometime in 2023 and was working pretty hard on the mailman by then. I'm not a person who writes two books at one time. My hat is
Uh-huh.
off to anybody who can do that. The best I can do is work on a book and maybe a short story or two at the same time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, see, you're loyal. You look like that loyal kind of man. That
Well, I
like
hope
I'm
so.
loyal to this story. How, for the listeners in understanding that Sick to Death is, I said earlier that it's kind of like the sunset of your Private Eye series. How difficult was it for you knowing that you've finalized all aspects of the character and the story, and you feel confident that you've given it everything that you can, even to the point of spending an entire year, in redeveloping it? Are you able to let go, or do you find yourself thinking, oh, it's one more thing I could have, should have, would have. If only I think about it, I can build another book up on it.
Yeah, that's the answer. I mean, I'm very attached to that character. This is not really a huge plot spoiler, but this book opens with my character who, let's say, is in his whatever mid 40s, finding out of the blue that he has an adult daughter from a one night stand years ago, and it's a daughter he never knew about until she approaches him. And a lot of people have told me they really like that character, and I really like her.
Uh-huh.
So I will confess that I have written a novella about Andy Hayes that's coming out this year, later this year,
Yay. Okay.
and I certainly think there's at least one more book to be
Uh-huh.
had. I just
Uh-huh.
can't let him go.
Okay. See, that's that loyalty thing.
Yeah, I don't. I'll have to figure out how to. The mailman's taking up, in a happy way, it's taking up a lot of my time and energy. I'm actually literally finishing up the sequel this week. So, but that's a happy problem to have, to figure out how to
Yeah.
juggle all this.
What words of encouragement could you give to an author who is finding themselves in a similar situation in that they are extremely good at one series in one genre and they've poured out their creative soul to that series, and now they're finding that, like you, these new characters are speaking to them, and that sense of how do you let go of one or slowly let go of one and take on another?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I would say, first of all, based on my experience, you don't have to necessarily look at the sense that you're ending a series
Mm,
just because you're super excited about a new character. That doesn't mean that the other series is going to die or something. It might it might not produce any more books, but I'm a person who I think it's really good to follow your heart and go with
mhm.
what's exciting you. Um, and when and I mean I'm very excited about writing The Mailman. I was also honestly quite excited about the novella I wrote about the private eye character. I mean that
Uh,
um, I really, and plus I've only written two novellas, but I love that format. That kind of 25,000 word length. I just think is really awesome. So I guess my advice would be to, yeah, follow your heart and follow your gut. And if you're an author of a long running series, but all of a sudden there's a new character who's like grabbing you by the lapels, and you really want to like write about this person, I would just do it. Yeah, I mean, go with that.
Nice, great answer. Was there a part of the Andy Hayes series in writing it all, parts or aspects of the protagonist that was cut for whatever reason that you wish could have been brought back, or did you find a way throughout the subsequent books to bring parts back?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say not so much bringing parts back, but focusing on like key characters. So
Mhm.
um, in the Andy Hayes series, there's a pretty solid rotating cast of we'll call them side characters at this point. There is Otto Mulligan, who is a bail bondsman and sort of Andy's best friend, and they kind of pal around together, but they both work together. That character didn't pop up until I think the fifth book.
Oh.
There's Suzanne Gregory, who is an investigative TV journalist and just happens to be Andy's ex-fiance. And Andy also has two ex-wives, so he does not have a great record in the romance department.
He's just spreading the wealth.
That's right. So his engagement to Suzanne ended when he cheated on her publicly. They have sort of mended ways to the point that he calls her for information in exchange for juicy tips. I mean, they've reached kind of a detente. So Suzanne's around in the books and the stories. Otto's around. Andy has two sons that are now in high school. They're certainly around now. He has this new daughter, and he works for a defense attorney named Burt Cunningham. That character tends to rotate in. But there are characters that I thought might be players earlier on that they haven't disappeared necessarily, but these other characters come to the forefront, and I think to me, that's been a very interesting development to figure out, who's hanging around the longest.
When these characters appear to you, do they just kind of manifest and invade your mind and say, I'm here? Or are you in the process of plotting things out and you're thinking about the characters? Do they come or do you invite them?
Oh, wow, what a great question. So I should also say I am a reformed pantser. So
Yes.
in the great pantser versus plotter debate, I do now outline a fair amount beforehand, and in the process of that, which honestly, I think outlining has gotten a bad name because in some ways it's just like writing. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
you're still staring at a blank page trying to figure
Mm-hmm,
out what's going to happen next.
mm-hmm.
You're
You're
just doing it
pantsing
in
the outline is
right.
what you're doing.
As it couldn't have put it better. Yeah. Um, so I mean, certainly that character Otto Mulligan, the bail bondsman, kind of just came to me. I realized, oh, he would be just a perfect foil. Um, but in other cases, there are characters that, in the process of plotting and then in the process of writing, I've definitely had characters just kind of interrupt, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, um, you need to include me." And I mean, there's a really good example of that in The Mailman. So Glenn and Rachel, the husband-wife attorney. So Glenn
Uh-huh.
has a 16-year-old daughter, Abby, by a first marriage, and so she's Rachel's stepdaughter, and she's 16. And she certainly was present in the outline. I knew she was going to be in the book, but I did not. It wasn't until I started writing that she really. This always sounds kind of hokey, but she really kind of like waved at me
Yeah.
and said, I want a bigger role," and
Uh-huh.
she ended up being really one of my favorite characters. Just brought a lot to it that I wasn't expecting. And I always say that I'm an 80% outliner, meaning I try to leave room for stuff I had thought about, stuff to
Uh-huh.
emerge organically during the writing process, and that character's growth is a good example of that.
Nice. When you find yourself talking to your friends, family, anyone that's not a writer, that's not in this space, do you see their heads kind of tilt to the side when you're almost like a cow looking at a new gate, like, where'd that come from?
Yes, people have asked me or asked my wife, like, is Andrew okay?
Is it okay?
Sometimes that's more to do with the themes or the plot points in my books.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Nice. That's when you know you're doing it right. And when do you find that the characters speak to you in such a way that when you're talking to other people, you reference these characters as if they're real people? Or have you learned to kind of keep that at bay and only talk about them like in safe spaces?
Um, it's very, I mean, it's really interesting talking about yourself as an author.
Mm,
I tend to gauge conversations I'm in, people I'm with, before I just sort of announce. I mean, people ask me what I do, I tell them. Um, but I'm sure you're aware of this. There's some people who hear that you're a mystery writer and they're fascinated, you know,
yeah.
and there's other people who hear that and they, whatever. It's just not their thing. So yeah, I definitely try to read the room a little bit
Uh-huh.
before I start talking about my characters as though they're my best friend.
I love that you say you have to read the room because not everybody understands the quirkiness of our brain and how these stories come together. And I know that sometimes those sidebar conversations are like, okay, if I didn't know Andrew any better, I would swear we need to just have him committed. But I think that's when you're doing it right. Like when your characters are real to you and when you find yourself thinking like, what would they be doing or what would they be saying? That's when you know it's right. Speaking of, if you were on a deserted island, which three characters, not your spouse, not your children, not family, which three characters would you want to be with you and why?
Three of my characters, or
Three of yours.
oh wow. Well, I'd want I definitely want Mercury Carter, the mailman, to be with me, because
Hmm.
the very first thing I would do would be I would hand him a coconut with our location on it and ask him to deliver it. And that way he could rescue us, because keep in mind, he's never missed a delivery.
Never missed a
Um,
delivery.
um, and, I'm still getting to know Mercury Carter's wife,
Hmm.
she's an accountant. By the way, he's fictionally from Rochester, New York. The series is set all over the country, but his wife Tamika is an accountant, and I'm still trying to get to know her. And I think she's a pretty interesting person. So I'd probably have her there. Um, I think I would go ahead and have Andy Hayes on the island as well. One thing he and I share in common is we're both big readers. Now, he's a big nonfiction reader, and I read more fiction than not, but um, he's such an interesting guy. I feel like he's in my head all day long. I might as well continue it.
Uh-huh. Who would show up and be angry that you didn't invite them and just cause so much chaos that you would swim back to wherever it is that that you're trying to go?
What a great question. Um, oh, probably Andy Hayes' second ex-wife named Crystal, who Andy and his first ex-wife have sort of made peace with what happened. Uh, Crystal is there's a lot there, if you know what I mean.
Uh-huh.
And I think if she showed up paddling a canoe onto that island, it would be pretty dangerous.
So you would swim with sharks
Yeah,
to get
I think
away.
I'd look for the nearest whatever piece of driftwood.
Nice. Where are the listeners able to interact with you, engage with you, to be a fan of yours with you?
Yeah, so I have a website, andrewwelshhuggins.com. If you go there, you'll be prompted to sign up for a monthly newsletter I do. It's a pretty low impact newsletter. A lot of it is recommended reads, things that I have enjoyed reading. It's got a calendar of events and pictures of my cats.
Okay.
So there's that. I'm on. I am on X, but I very rarely interact on X anymore.
Mhm.
I'm on Facebook. Very easy to find me, either my personal or my professional page. Instagram at AWH Columbus. Um, and so, yeah, I'd say between my website and my newsletter, and then any of those social platforms, I'm available, and I love interacting with readers.
Wonderful. Well, I have had so much fun. And when we were offline, I had referenced because we are so close in proximity to distance. Don't be surprised. Your cats will be meowing, saying, Daddy, there's somebody weird
Oh, I love it.
waving from the sidewalk. So don't be surprised if I show up. I'll call first.
All right.
I, we've come to the part of our show that I call One for the Road. It's a series of it should be this or that questions where you just pick one, but I'm looking at my list and it's so random. The list that I pulled for you is essentially one's got to go. So I'm going to list three things, and you tell me of the three which one absolutely has to go. And you can say all, because there's been a time in which some of these I'm like, yeah, no, all of those have to go. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, pizza, burgers, or tacos?
Burgers.
Burgers. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper?
Uh, Pepsi.
Oh, okay. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, or Led Zeppelin?
Oh man, I can't keep. I have to choose. Oh my
Say
god.
none.
I'm going to have to say none. Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And the last one, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Lord of the Rings?
Oh, another tough one. Who boy. You know what? I'll be contrary and I'll say Lord of the Rings.
Okay, and I'm going to give you a bonus one because this one is kind of waving his hand at me. So this is our bonus one. Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, or The Sopranos?
That's actually kind of easy. I'm going to go with Game of Thrones. I have a full confession to make. In the
Okay.
light of day, I have only read one Game of Thrones books, and I've never watched the series. So
Okay.
you heard it here first.
Good to know. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me. This has been so much fun.
I've loved it, Florenza. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.